But now he's the type of fellow, he didn't care, he was gonna do it anyway.
A couple of things just very quickly on this, on the history of the Klan. You're right, the Klan is established immediately after the Civil War, that's named in Bedford Forest. That Klan is suppressed by the federal government. There's an enormous, in fact, it's a huge debate in the Reconstruction era about alleged expansion of the federal government. They shut it down, and they develop a whole series of civil rights legislation that allows them to prosecute people, and the Klan basically disappears by the early 1870s. That doesn't mean there's not all kinds of other violence, but that organization that Forrest created more or less is suppressed. A second Klan gets reborn in the 19-teens, partly inspired by the movie Birth of a Nation, which had told the story of Reconstruction with the Klans as heroes, partly in the context of a lot of agitation over Jews and immigrants, Catholics. And the Klan, in one of its first places that's really big is Indiana. So there's a second Klan, and that's the Klan that we still more or less have today. But most Klans were organized on a state basis. In Mississippi, the Klan was moribund through the late 50s. It starts to get traction again in that 60, 61, 62. And by, I think it's 63, it's powerful. They do a thing where they have cross burnings. They decide they're going to have a cross burning in every county the same night. And they don't quite pull it off, but they get 65 counties in one night. So it explodes. And, but it hadn't been released before.
Since you made the statement about cross-burning saying, do you think it was coincidental that Meg Evans was killed and family name on the same night?
That's just, yeah.
Do you really think
Yeah,
that was?
That was far, those were far distant events. It's just, it's a kind of, gives you a sense of how fraught that time is.
I'm saying he was from the Delta. The guy that killed Meg Evans was from the Delta region that family name was arrested in. So was the coincidence, it's just...
That part was not work. I think it was just after the same. But I want to touch on this question again, because I think this is a really interesting question. Is how do you get your mind around a situation where, on the one hand, a black person could be taken off the board in the Jim Crow South if people decided they didn't like you, or you failed to get off the sidewalk when someone was approaching, or just people saw you on the side of the road and were liquored up, or whatever it might be, black people could be and were simply taken off the board, and there were no consequences to the people who did that. I mean, the story I just told, a state legislator shot a man at the cotton gin in front of everybody, and nothing happened. And then the person who finally came forward as a witness was also murdered. In that case, there's never even been a trial over the found case, right? So that's no longer the world we live in. But what gets me about that is I mean, I'm always perplexed by this too, that you're describing growing up in a home that actually you're waxing nostalgic for the old days. A lot of what you were saying was, if only we could go back to this time when there was a community and people cared for each other and looked after each other. And I'm also looking at a world in which a state legislator could shoot a guy dead, and with no consequence. How do we actually process both of those things?
Well, what you just said, as long as you were in this community, you were safe. But now if you were to go downtown and didn't get off the sidewalk for somebody, then there were consequences. And then our parents, in turn, ensured that as kids growing up, that we stayed in this community for our own safety. Am I making sense? Yeah, that's basically what happened. Because we knew, it's like when I was saying about looking at the pictures of Emmett Till and the graphic pictures that were shown, we knew what could happen to us if we left this community. So as a girl growing up here in Macomb, it wasn't often that I went downtown in Macomb. And if I did, it was with my parents.
Well, how much contact did you have with white people?
None.
There you go.
None.
What about your parents? Did they have any contact with white people?
Yes, they did.
funny. I read this book, Sweetness. Well, I'm from Columbia, Walter Baker, the Columbian native. And it describes, and all the people that they interviewed in this book are people that I know personally, most of them anyway. And Eddie Payton, Walter's brother, he talks about the exact same thing. He says that in the black community during that time, he said they really didn't have a total concept as children as to what they were missing. He said they knew things were different. They had separate schools. He said they knew that the white Columbia High School had things that they didn't have. They couldn't go play in the city park. They couldn't play on the football field. He said, but in that community, he said they had their own stores. He said it was self-contained. So they didn't really have a total concept of actually what all they were missing, by not being integrated. And then when they passed, of course, Brown versus Board of Education didn't kick in until many years later in 1970, when they first integrated. He said that it was like, it was culture shock. Now we got to actually, and before that time, they had actually passed a policy in Columbia that says, hey, you can go to school wherever you want. You can apply to any school you want to in the county. But of course, the black students and their parents didn't force them to go to the white school because they knew that was going to subject them to all types of, harassment. So they just didn't do it. You were safe. As long as you stay here where we are, in our self-contained community, you'll be all right. You'll be safe. And that's why he said that parents, he said when it got dark, parents made sure they knew where their children were. They were at home. You had to be at home. You didn't venture out after certain times of night. You didn't go certain places because you knew if you got caught in the wrong place, you might be subjected to that type of thing. So he was saying the exact same thing that you were. You said a lot of being nostalgic about the old times. I mean, people knew things were bad. But I mean, they made the best of what they had inside their own community, and they rallied together. And in that sense, I think the black community was a whole lot better off.
Yeah, it was a whole lot different, like now.
Totally different.
Where I live in a subdivision. I know all my neighbors, and all my neighbors are black. But then do I visit them?
You don't really know.
No. Basically I talked to my neighbor across the street when we were out at the mailbox getting our mail, and then the lady that lived next door to me sometimes when we were out working in our yard. But the community that I grew up in, I knew every single person and visited. And you knew these people intimately, and I still have a relationship with all those people that grew up with me, basically.
I was born in 65, and I can tell you from my own account, if I was around the corner playing, anybody on that street had permission to whoop my behind.
Oh, yeah.
And then when I made it back home, I got another one when I got home.
Yeah.
The whole community had raised you.
Right, yeah, we were raised by that building.
They had permission to do whatever they needed to do.
Yeah,
And it's just not like that anymore.
right, that's what
There's a
it
big
is.
difference between city and rural supplies, because my mom grew up in the city, and my dad grew up in the country. And they do have different stories. Now, but they were born in the 30s. But I don't know when it really changed into totally more self-contained communities, because my mom tells me that she was poor. They were poor white people. And where Pearl River Bridge is in Macomb, people, the Pearl River Bridge that goes into downtown.
Yeah.
She grew up in that area, and it was mostly blacks in that area. And she tells stories, her stories are different. So, but that was kind of before the violence. So I'll have to ask her more
Right,
questions.
and see where you're talking about, where State Street, go across that bridge. That was almost like the dividing line between the black community and the white community.
So my mom was
See.
on the wrong side.
Well, she was poor,
That's
you
right.
know,
Well,
and
that's
so that's
how
where
she,
poor whites live.
when we
Yeah,
discuss
working class.
racism then,
Yeah, working class
she
whites
ties
live.
she ties it to more of an economic
Right.
line also.
Yeah, it was an economic line. And then north of there is where black community was, where Brooklyn was, on up north of where you're talking about. And it was more of an economic line, and it's almost the same way now, from that community to the other side of town. You know what I mean? But it was a working class group of people that lived over on the east side of
And even when they didn't have, there was still that segregation between, these are the poor whites, these are the.
Exactly.
Yeah, my
Yeah.
mom played Black Hills.
Right.
That,
Because
her and her brothers and sisters were the only
You watch
whites
some
in
these old
Right.
English or Scottish movies where the class system up there, if you were in the upper class, you don't deal with it. They're not color, it's just strict class.
And then if you're talking about with the houses, some of the houses in that area, the next door neighbors were black. You see what I'm saying, where, where it might, the line might
A
stop
lot
or
of them
whatever.
worked at, Hillview.
Exactly.
My grandfather, was one of the foremen there, and they all, my mom said that they went to each other's houses, they helped each other. When my grandmother got sick, all of the black community came and took, there was 11 brothers and sisters, and they all took turns coming in and taking care of them, while, when her mother was sick.
Yeah, some of that stuff happened in that community, but you're right. See, that was where it was separated by class, from the east side to the west side. And then you have that, right over, where is it, around Baycon, over in that area that used to be called. Where some,
I know where you're talking.
yeah, some houses were built, and that was for some, like, people that worked in the railroad, was it Larry? And then the people that had certain positions in the railroad, when they started working at the railroad, lived in East Palm. But if you had the higher positions, you lived on the other side of the railroad. So,
But just to throw in a couple of things real quick on this. One of the things to keep in mind is that when you're a historian, lots of things are changing at the same time. And we're just looking at one thing, and when we try to explain why things change, looking at only one thing, we sometimes miss that there are other factors that are going on too. So I'll give you a seemingly random thing. Air conditioning, right? People lived outdoors in Mississippi. They lived on their porches. And everybody knew what was going on in the neighborhood, and everybody knew every school child who went past, because it was 100 degrees if you were inside. And once every house has air conditioning, people are bottled up in there. So that's an example. Similarly, think what happens to the structure of commerce, right? Most people, even in the America I grew up in, you shopped the local shoe store, the local food store. You lived in a neighborhood. And neighborhoods get blown up that way with the large box stores, and now we routinely drive 15 minutes to some Walmart or whatever. You just look at the geography of Macomb, right? Which the interstate comes in, the side roads come in, all the commerce, all the hotels, all the restaurants move out to the interstate exchange, right? And so there's just ways in which communities being corroded for lots of other causes. So the very last thing I'd say about this, it's really important. I mean, this issue really fascinates me, the nostalgia for the bad old days, right? And I'm always trying to puzzle it out and trying to work with students about how we can think about it without romanticizing a past that we don't want to go back to, right? One of the things segregation did was it put everybody in the same boat. You were all subject, it didn't matter if your parents had gone to college, or this person was a physician, or somebody else was a railroad worker. You all had to live in the same neighborhood. You all had to send your kids to the same school, and you were all vulnerable to the same. None of you got to vote. You were all vulnerable to the same things. And so that created communities that had a kind of class structure unto themselves. And one of the things, I'm not saying integration was bad, I would never say that. But one of the things that happened as the Jim Crow regime is broken, and as schools like the one I teach at start accepting more than 2 black students a year, now we accept hundreds, some of those people who had been compelled to live in that black community get out. And the people who don't get out are often the people with the least resources. So you end up creating black neighborhoods where a lot of the most economically successful, most attacked people in that community no longer live. And so there's lots of other things that are happening that are actually corroding that.
this is corroded the whole community that I actually grew up in. It doesn't actually exist. Because everybody that lived there, older people have died out, and then all the kids have gone someplace else.
Well, and that's kind of what I wanted to say. Whenever the story broke in the newspaper last year about the Martin Luther King Memorial in D.C. and who designed it, and it talked about him growing up over there in Berglund, and his story about growing up in Berglund was almost the same story as yours. It's as if y'all got together and compared notes, and you didn't.
He
But
lived next
he
door
had
to
that
church.
same story.
Yeah, but
So-
he lived in the same community. He lived next door to the church.
I read that article in my classroom, and in my local culture class, and one of my students, as I was reading, I could see him get more and more troubled on his face. And when I finished, he's a real outspoken kid. He was like, "That is not the neighborhood that I live in." He lives right there where you live and where that the story was about. He said, you can't, the stuff he talks about cannot be done over there. There aren't a lot of men, because it talked about the male influence, the father figures, all that. It was really a wake-up call for that kid. And that there ever could have been a community like the community that you described and that he described, where he lives now, which he feels like is like a ghetto, which is really remarkable in just a few years. We can go from that idyllic community kind of place to boarded up buildings and scary stuff.
Anybody got a final question for our panelists? Well, then please join me in thanking them. This was terrific.